Our scripture reading this morning is Mark chapter 1, 16 through 20. Mark chapter 1, 16 through 20. Passing alongside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. And going on a little farther, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, who were in their boat mending the nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and followed him. You may be seated.
Good morning. When I was in college, it was my senior year, and Carrie got the opportunity that semester to travel to Asia. She was going to get to go to China and Japan as part of OC's study abroad program. And I was going to get to travel all over Edmond, Oklahoma, so I was going to stay here. I'll let you figure out who had a greater time. As a young couple, not yet married, being across the world from each other, as you can imagine, communication was difficult. And so I remember Carrie and I had worked out a system in which she would let me know which night she would be able to call, and she was going to have to call me in the middle of the night because for her, that was the only time that was available for her. And so I would have to set an alarm for 5 minutes before the phone call was going to happen so I could wake up in time to answer the call and talk to Carrie. And it was great. Getting to hear about her adventures and all the things that she was doing over in Asia. But I remember there was one night, I think just one night, hopefully just one night, or I may be in more trouble later. I remember there was one night in which I missed the call. I don't know if my alarm didn't go off or being a tired college student, I just woke up, hit that alarm to go off. But I remember waking up the next morning and thinking, I was supposed to have a phone call last night. And looking at my phone to find I had a phone call last night, and I had missed it. And I felt terrible. I did. And for some reason, Carrie still kept me around. That's my only failure, right? That one phone call. But I can remember thinking, I wish I could just go back in time earlier and shake myself awake and yell, "Answer the call." Carrie's calls didn't get to come very often because of the way their schedule was. I didn't get to talk to her very much. And so this was my one chance to hear from her, hear about what she was doing over there, and tell about all the amazing adventures I was a part of here in Oklahoma. I had some adventures, just not the same. This morning, as we just read, we're gonna be in Mark chapter 1. And in this chapter, we read about Jesus calling some of his first disciples. And just as important, we read about the way they responded to his call. Because a call is important. Jesus' call to his disciples is important, but their response is equally important. And so this morning, we're going to talk about Jesus' call. Because before we get into the lesson and before we start talking about the text here, I want us to all understand that Jesus is calling each one of us. Each and every one of us. Some of us, I believe this morning, Jesus is just calling us to follow him. To be a follower of Christ, to put him on in baptism, to begin a life in which we are a follower of Jesus, a disciple of him. Some of us, I think that is the call this morning. For some of us, I believe Jesus is calling us this morning to draw nearer to him. Maybe we are a follower, but our relationship with him has grown apart or has never really been as strong as it needs to be. And so I think for some of us this morning, Jesus is calling us to draw nearer to him. And still, for some of us, I think Jesus is calling us this morning into greater service, to work for him, to get busy growing the kingdom. In this particular section in Mark chapter 1, he calls these disciples to come and be fishers of men. That means he wants them to help grow the kingdom. And here is the response in chapter 1, verse 18. Short verse, but I think there's a lot to unpack in this verse. It says, and immediately they left their nets and followed him. And so this morning, I want us to look at three different parts to their response because I think it applies to us and the call that Jesus has for us this morning. So number one, the first part of their response is it was an immediate response. Immediately, they left their nets and followed him. If you look at that verse in chapter 1, verse 18, he says immediately, and immediately is a word that Mark likes to use a lot in his gospel, but here I think it has a very specific application for us. It's that Peter and Andrew, when they heard Jesus' call, there was no thinking about it. They dropped their nets, they got out of the boat, and they followed him. There is an urgency to Jesus' call. Jesus' call for us is urgent, and we see it here in this passage. And we actually see it in some other places too. This morning we're going to spend some time here in Mark chapter 1, but we're also going to look at some of the responses that we see in Luke chapter 9. So if you want to turn to Luke chapter 9 and kind of hold your thumb there or mark it, we're going to go back and forth a little bit between these two chapters. But in Luke chapter 9, verses 59 and 60, we see this individual who's called by Jesus to follow him. And this is what it says in verse 59 and 60. It says, to another he said, follow me. But he said, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus said to him, leave the dead to bury their own dead, for as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God. I can remember reading that passage when I was younger and thinking, wow, that's pretty harsh. But I think that the message that Jesus is trying to get us to understand is that the kingdom work is urgent. There's an urgency to it. There is nothing else in this life that is more urgent than answering the call for Jesus. And so this individual, he says, can I go and bury my father? And Jesus is telling him, my business is urgent. We need to get busy. There are things to do. And so I think for some of us, we need to understand that Jesus' call for us is an urgent call. Far too often, I think there are Christians who live their life as I'm gonna Christians. They have Jesus on call waiting. It's like, I'm gonna answer the call as soon as, once we get through this pandemic, then I'm gonna be able to, or once I can get my kids to the age where they're, more manageable in worship, then I'm going to. Or, once I can get things settled down at work, then I'm going to. We spend a lot of our time talking about what we're going to do and not so focused on what we're doing. I think Jesus has enough workers who have promised him future work. What Jesus needs is people who are willing to get busy today, right now. This isn't Kmart. I don't know if people are going to get this reference. Young people, you're not. This isn't Kmart. You can't put your talents on layaway. That's what we want to do. Hey, I'm going to use these. I'm just going to use these later. Kids, go home this afternoon and say, Mom and Dad, what is Kmart and what is layaway? And they'll talk to you about it. But that's what we want to do. We just want to put things off. I'm going to do that. I'm just going to do it later. Jesus' call to the disciples, it was urgent. And so immediately they left their nets and followed him. And so for some of us this morning, my question is just, what are you waiting for? What is it in your life that you are waiting for? Because I can promise you there is nothing in your life more urgent than the call that Jesus is making for you. If it is a call to follow him as a disciple, I promise you there is no time like today to become a follower of Christ. There's no time like it. For those of you who are waiting to improve your relationship with God until things settle down in life, spoiler alert, things don't settle down in life. They don't. I've spent my whole life waiting for the next stage when things, and guess what? Next stage, it's just as rough. And so whatever you are waiting for, I promise you, answering Jesus' call is more urgent. What are you waiting for? There is a response, there is a part of their response that is immediate. Number two, second part of their response that we see is that it was a sacrificial response. They made sacrifice. Now, you may not see that right away when you read verse 18, but in 18 it says, immediately they left their nets and followed him. And we need to understand what the statement, left their nets, really means. These men are fishermen. They're not fishermen like I am a fisherman in that I went fishing one time with my father-in-law and didn't catch any fish. This is not a hobby. This is their livelihood. This is everything. This is their career. This is how they put food on the table. And when Jesus calls them, they drop their nets and they leave them. A little bit later in the chapter, when it's talking about James and John, not only do they leave their nets, they leave their father. They're like, Dad, we got to go. We got to follow this guy. This call is important for us to answer. And so when you talk about the fact that they left their nets, it means that these men sacrificed everything to follow Jesus. We actually see that in Matthew chapter 19, verse 27. Jesus has been describing some of these other individuals and their unwillingness to leave things behind. And Peter says, Jesus, we left everything. And Jesus doesn't deny it. These men left everything to follow Jesus. If you held your spot over there in Luke chapter 9, look again at Luke chapter 9 at one of the other individuals in this chapter who's called by Jesus. In Luke chapter 9, verses 61 and 62, it says, Yet another said, I will follow you, Lord, but let me first say farewell to those at my home. And Jesus said to him, No one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. He says, you got to be willing to sacrifice. Because if you get busy, but you're always looking back, you're not going to be plowing straight. You can look at me and probably figure out pretty quick that I've never plowed a field in my life. But I understand what Jesus is saying because I have driven across country with children in the back seat. And you know, when your kids are in the back and you're turning so that you can do some correction, and then you turn back and you realize, this is not the lane that I was once in. You get off course. When you lose your focus on where you're going, you get off course. And so Jesus is saying, if you keep looking back, you're not going to be able to follow me the way that you need to. Answering the call takes sacrifice. Sometimes we are going to have to give things up in order to answer the call. Again, for those of you who are waiting to answer the call to follow Jesus in your life, it may cost you a job. It may cost you friendships and other relationships. It may cost you certain habits and lifestyles. You may have to sacrifice those things in order to answer the call and become a follower of Jesus. For those of you who are waiting to answer the call to draw nearer to Christ, it may sacrifice some of your free time. You may have to sacrifice some of the things in your life that you are wasting your time on in order to draw nearer to God. You may have to sacrifice those things. Those of you who are waiting to be about the service, the work that God's called you to, you may have to sacrifice things, put them on hold or put them off completely so that you can answer the call because Jesus' call isn't just immediate, but it's sacrificial. It takes us saying, you know what? These things may seem important, but they're not as important. Leave your nets. Follow Jesus. Third part of the response. This may seem a little obvious and simple, but the third part of their response is it was an obedient response. Jesus says, follow me. So what did they do? They followed him. And you're like, yeah, that's easy. However, I don't think it's always that simple. I think there are a lot of us who've said, yes, I'm following Jesus. But when we get down to it, is that really what's going on? In his book, All In, Mark Batterson says the following. He says, I think most people in most churches think that they are following Jesus, but I am not so sure. They may think they are following Jesus, but the reality is this. They have invited Jesus to follow them. See what he's saying there? I think there are a lot of people who say, I became a follower of Jesus. I'm absolutely a follower. And wherever I go, I'm going to take Jesus with me. I'm going to be about my purposes, about my goals, and I'm going to take Jesus along for the ride so that I can feel good about it. Because at the end of the day, as long as I'm a follower of Jesus, then whatever I'm doing is good. I can serve God right here, doing what I'm doing because I'm a follower of Jesus. Right, following Jesus means doing the things that Jesus has called us to do. Answering the call. Turn once more over to Luke chapter 9. Luke chapter 9, this time in verses 57 and 58. Says, as they were going along the road, someone said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. Notice what he says. He says, wherever you go, I'm going to follow you. And this is Jesus' response. He says, foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. I think what Jesus is saying is, before you make that promise, before you say you're willing to follow me wherever I go, you better understand wherever I go and what that means. If I am a follower of Jesus, that means wherever he goes, I'm going to follow. We just sang how many songs? Scott did a great job this morning choosing songs in which we talk about following Jesus. And we can sing it and we can say it, but I'm just telling you, if our actions don't match up with what we said, we're not a follower. We're just taking him wherever we want to go. My kids like to play following the leader. You know, they'll lead around the room and you follow what they're doing. But I'm just telling you, when dad is the leader, when we're not playing the game, we're not very good at following the leader. When it's a game and we're climbing over sofas and we're doing somersaults, yeah, we get it. But when it gets down to the nitty-gritty and we got to actually follow the leader, well, I'm not so sure about that. We need to understand that when we say this is an obedient response, we are saying wherever Jesus leads, I'm going to go there. I'm going to follow him. I'm not just going to take Jesus along for the purposes and goals in my life. I'm going to be about what I think God wants me to do. In Matthew chapter 16, verse 24, when Jesus says, whoever will follow me is going to lay down his cross, deny himself, and follow me, we need to understand what that means. Again, we can't just hope to go through life the way we want to, slap a Jesus bumper sticker on the back of our car, and then say, see, I'm a follower of Jesus. Follower means Jesus leads, and I'm going to do whatever I'm called to do. Carrie and I had a stranger come to our wedding. I had never met him before. I don't know his story, and I honestly didn't even find out till later that he was at the wedding. But we had a stranger come to our wedding, and he was frustrated because the reception took place at a different building. He was like, wow, I was hoping to just come to the wedding, get some food, and leave. I was like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you came to someone else's wedding and it didn't happen the way that you wanted it to happen. You weren't even invited to our wedding. But imagine going to someone's wedding. This is lovely, but you know what I would have done? I don't care. It was my wedding, and I wasn't even about to tell Carrie, this is what I would have done. I was just doing what I'm told, okay? We have been invited by Jesus to follow him, his way, do things the way he has called it, on his terms. But some of us go, yep, I want to follow Jesus. Jesus, I'm going to follow you into service. And he's like, great. You know, I don't know where you're going. We're going this way, Jesus. Come on, I'm following you. That's not following Jesus. Following Jesus means we answer the call on his terms. What he's called us to do, how he's called us to do it, that's what it means to follow Jesus. It's immediate. It's obedient. I skipped one. You got the outline. When you think you're going to be smooth and repeat the points and you can't even remember. It was immediate, it was sacrificial, and it was obedient. All three parts of those are important. When I missed Carrie's call that night, yes, I was disappointed in myself because, I knew I had let her down as a boyfriend. This is my chance to show her that, hey, yeah, it's college life, I'm tired, but I'm able to get up in the middle of the night. So part of it was I let her down. But the real reason I was disappointed was because I missed out on what was at the other end of that call. A chance to hear about her day, about her adventures, and exploring a part of the world that I will likely never travel to. I missed it. The reason we're talking about these things this morning is not just so that we can feel good about ourselves and say, oh yeah, I answered the call, I did what I'm supposed to, but because when you miss the call, when you don't answer the call that Jesus has for you in your life, you miss out on what's on the other end of that call. Jesus has so much to offer us. And for those of us this morning that Jesus is calling to follow him, I'm just telling you, with him comes blessings and rewards and peace and comfort. And when we don't answer that call, we miss out on those things. And for those of us this morning who we feel like God is calling us to draw nearer to him, but we've just been putting it off, guess what? We're not answering the call just so that we can say, oh yeah, I read my Bible every day and I prayed every day. Good job, Jeremy, pat on the back. No, we're answering that call because on the other end of that, I know that by drawing nearer to Christ, I have peace, I have hope, I have comfort in my life. I can go through the day with that sense of peace because he's with me. And for those of us who I believe that Jesus is calling us into greater service this morning, when we don't answer that call, we are missing out on an opportunity for Jesus to use us to accomplish incredible things for his kingdom. It's what's on the other end of that call that's important. And so this morning, I think there are some of us who, just like a senior in college who is asleep in the middle of the night and the phone is ringing, some of us need to be shaken awake this morning and just told, answer the call. He is calling you. Answer the call. What are you waiting for? Answer the call. Go all in. Sacrifice whatever it is that is holding you back from following Jesus and answer the call. On his terms, not your way, on his terms. Answer the call. This morning, answering that call for you may take place right where you're standing in a moment. Right now, you're sitting. Where you will be standing. It may be a private response that takes place right there in which you say, all right, I am ready to answer the call, Jesus. I'm ready to draw nearer to you. I'm ready to get to work serving in your kingdom. For some of you, that answer may be a public thing in that you need to come down here, you need to put Christ on in baptism, you need to begin your life following him. Whether it's public, whether it's private, I want to encourage you this morning, answer the call. Answer the call and do it as we stand and sing this song.